Well, it's been a heck of a week. Hillary reaches a milestone. The president endorses her, and Donald Trump just keeps digging himself a hole, seems to me.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Kind of a historical week, right? Now, I know there are a lot of you who will send me email about how unworthy Hillary Clinton is to be the President of the United States, especially when I wax on about Donald Trump and how unworthy he is to be the President of the United States. I've told you already, I don't have a candidate in this race as a voter. As a broadcaster, obviously I have to facilitate conversation. But whether you're a fan of Hillary Clinton's or not, whether you loathe her or whether you think she is everything that a candidate for the presidency ought to be, you have to recognize that this was a pivotal week in history. The nomination, informally to be, but the delegate count secured to be the Democratic nominee is unquestionably a very major thing for this country. Hillary said so herself.
We've reached a milestone. The first time in our nation's history that a woman will be a major party's nominee.
And that will be part of our conversation, obviously. Professor Shanna Pearson Merkowitz is from URI. She works in political science. And Noel is back. Noel Rubinton is becoming one of my fan favorites. He's a freelance journalist and a consultant and writes about this stuff. Good to see you, my friend. And nice to meet you, Professor.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming.
You for having me.
Ladies first, historic.
Yes, definitely. Even today when women make up 50% of the country, they make up less than 20% of elected officials in this country.
Actually, it's 50 plus. It's actually,
yes,
some real activists on this conversation will point out that you are the majority.
Yes.
You people.
Us people.
You women.
We are. We are the majority. We live longer.
Oh, you got to rub it in? Jeez, this is going to be a tough one tonight, I think.
That means we end up being more than 50% of the country. But even if we were only 50% of the country, women do make up about 20% of elected officials, and the other routes to becoming president, being a high-powered lawyer, CEO, the external routes, women continue to make up a very small portion of them. And therefore, reaching the point where you even have the possibility to become president is a very small statistical chance, because those routes to the presidency, women don't tend to hold a lot of those seats. And so whether or not, Clinton's presidency is going to be, whether or not she's going to make it to being president, even being a viable candidate for president and as a woman is a very small statistical chance.
Interesting. I want to obviously elaborate on all of that. In the Friday programs, as you well know, if you're a regular viewer, if you're not, welcome. We tape these Friday programs the day before, so if anything demonstrative has happened since our recording yesterday afternoon, sorry. As we were recording, the president endorsed Hillary Clinton. We'll talk about that. I want to dig in with Shanna here, but your reflection on that statistical commentary and the nature of the nomination.
I think it is a lot of progress. I mean, we haven't, women haven't even had the right to vote for a century yet, and now somebody's going to run for president. I think an interesting sign of how we're still at a transitional stage was when people talked to Hillary Clinton about, well, would you name another woman to be your vice president? Are we ready for that? And she didn't really come out and say, yes, we're ready for that. She said, well, maybe this time.
I don't think we're ready for that.
But I think it shows that progress is not always immediate.
Yeah, well, that's my instinct. What's your instinct? I don't think I don't know if I don't even know.
Yeah,
that you actually raised the issue. But
people point out there are not a lot of people complaining, saying, are you ready to have two white males on the ticket?
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's an important point to note that we are one election cycle short of 100 years from women getting the right to vote. And it's taken this long to get a woman just being the nominee for a major party, right? And there is a lot of reason for that, I'm not sure the country understands if they're fully ready of what that means, that they're not sure. What does a woman president look like? Like, how does she behave in office? how does she, what type of policies does she go after? I think that is an open question to a lot of people. And the political science research shows that women do pursue different things than male legislators. And so, is the country ready for someone in that leadership position to possibly change what we're talking about? That's an open question. But, I think I saw a quote in the New York Times today where somebody said it's not that big of a deal because 50% of the country is women. So, of course, we're going to end up with a nominee. But it's been 50% or over 50% for a long time.
But to the question, I burped out, no, we're not ready for a double female ticket. If the senator from Massachusetts ends up being tagged in this particular game, I think that is a high wire act for Hillary Clinton. Now, have I examined how I, as a voter or as an analyst, think about it? Not really. But I don't think the countries.
But we're not. I'm not sure.
That's a cold.
It's about
that's a
being
cold
ready.
shower.
I don't know if it's about whether we're ready or whether we're used to it. Not that long ago, 2 women ran for Senate in California and were elected, and people thought that was kind of shocking. The idea of 2 women senators, like, what's that about?
Yeah.
So it's been 2 men for centuries.
But do you have a thought on
well, I think, Hillary Clinton's going to want to shore up the ticket by bringing somebody in who is different than her, right? So you never want 2 people on a ticket that have the same thing, right? So Barack Obama didn't go for a newbie. When he ran for president, he went for Joe Biden because he says, you have the experience in the Senate and experience with elected officials to be able to help me achieve my goals, right? Hillary Clinton's going to be doing the same thing.
And they were partners. There's no doubt about that. This might be the first time in recent history that a vice president was actually respected on a pretty consistent basis by the president of the United States. Well, look, traditionally, there's not a lot of tradition in this election season, is there? But traditionally, a vice presidential pick is a strategic pick for geography, for electoral votes to secure, an electoral college victory. I guess we're going to have to see where the landscape comes out in the next weeks before the convention to make that analysis, right? That's usually the move. It's all about, securing the weaker side, whether that be I'm too young, he was experienced, but usually it's geographic.
Right, or it's they have executive experience, right? Get a governor or someone who's run something from an executive side, right? So she has been Secretary of State, she has some of that executive, but she could go for that key state, key governor, bring that person in with that executive decision making, or some, more exciting person, a Hispanic mayor, there's been some talks about, or former mayor, to make some key interest groups, to make a branch out to some key groups. But I think you're right, geographic is key.
The history of using gender in this is not great. You go back to Geraldine Ferraro, who ran with Mondale, who immediately had all sorts of problems. But more recently, McCain, who was seen as like a macho military guy, and he brought in a woman, partly to soften his image. And I think we know how well that worked.
Yeah, but she was nuts.
I don't think that's why he appointed her.
No, I think after he did, he went, oh man, she's nuts. Interesting conversation on the radio yesterday with my callers about this historic moment, and really fascinating feedback, especially from women who struggle with Hillary politically, at least those who don't match up to her, and who are having a hard time acquiescing to the idea that, like Barack Obama, if you did not vote for him in 2008, you still probably, if you have a soul, you were caught up in the unprecedented nature of having an African American elected to the presidency. I don't know, maybe it's too early for people to get into that thing. Maybe come November it would be different. What's your take on the celebration that still may come for people who want to see gender equity as high as that, who don't buy her political story? That's the conflict for everybody, it seems.
And I think it's too early. It's, that's something that people got wrapped up in when Barack Obama actually won the presidency. And all of a sudden there was this moment of like, wow, even if I don't agree with him, he got enough of the country behind him to win. And I think that probably that same emotional, even for people who don't agree with Hillary Clinton, that same emotional thing will happen if she is elected president. That simply gaining the nomination isn't going to get people, wow, if they don't like the Democrats, right? But if she actually wins, I think there will be a lot of women who may say, I didn't support her, but that's still, it's great for the country, or it's important to see.
I think for Sanders, one of the things that was remarkable about his campaign has been the enormous number of younger women who supported him and didn't support Hillary. But now, I mean, unless something bizarre happens, he's not going to get there. She is. So where are they going to go? It's unlikely that they're going to go to Donald Trump. Seems likely that they're going to go to her. Will they have great passion for it? Will they stay home? Hard to know. But I think it's hard to see it now, but I think there will be some of that effect.
I said something rather clumsily the other day. I was trying to make a point. And I said, I don't see her as a woman. And what I meant was her presence and her status and her resume are long-standing. She's not a new. Barack Obama was a new story. Came on like gangbusters. We're pretty familiar with Hillary Clinton, all the bells and whistles and the warts. And I think, regardless of what you think Benghazi stands for and what the email controversy stands for and all that, she is accomplished. She has a resume. You may not like her performance, but the resume is outstanding. And so I think if there was to be a woman who'd rise to this level, it would have to be her because she has just done X number of jobs to qualify her. It's unquestioned. Right.
But of course, that's also why people don't like her, right? Or a large number of people don't like her because we know her, right? And Barack Obama, one of his strengths was we didn't know much about him, right? If he had been in office for a long time and had held as many jobs as she had and had been in the news for this long, there would have been those things that people hated, and they would have said, that's why we don't like him, is because of those things, right? The longer someone serves in office, the more track record they have for people to glue on that that's why I don't support you. And everybody inevitably will have some mistakes, and some are worse than others. And so you can, everybody gets to judge the candidate's mistakes
and marital baggage and the uniqueness of being tied to her husband, who, end up being a controversial but very popular president. It's just it's a very crazy scene.
But that history means that, we do know her. We do know that she has an incredibly good resume, and it also means we know her downfalls.
Something that struck me this week, and I'll give credit to a writer in the New York Times who wrote about it, that I think her image as a fighter has really grown in the last months. And the woman who wrote the article went back to Benghazi, and which I think most people have forgotten, that 14-hour day where she sat and took it from those people and gave it back to them. And she's gone many rounds with Bernie Sanders. So I think that she may come out with a image that's been somewhat transformed as a winning fighter.
All right.
And that may go past some of her baggage.
Well, speaking of image, hold your thought, because when we come back, there's another guy in this race, and I don't know. Stay with us.
I have said, and I believe this with all my heart, he is not qualified to be commander-in-chief, either by experience, preparation, or temperament.
Well, my relationship with the audience, they know how I feel, ditto. What do you make, Noel, of this week that has been with Donald Trump and his clinging on now, more or less admonishing GOP leadership to, kind of get over it? His commentary about the Indiana federal judge who happens to be of Mexican descent, who is presiding over his Trump University case, who cannot be objective about it because of his ethnicity. Oh, I didn't really say that. You weren't listening. You misconstrued.
Anybody else, you would think he had a horrible week and he couldn't come back from it. But with Trump, how could you write it off at this point? Who knows how he's going to get out of this, but it seems at least possible. He's got all these people supporting him.
Well, he's fighting his way out. Well, I don't know, man. The GOP leadership right now is really dysfunctionally angry at this.
And so, this is the big question. Can Trump hurt himself? Trump's running on making the front page of the New York Times and every newspaper and having us talk about him, right? And it doesn't matter what he says. The more controversial, the more airtime we give him, right? And that's how he's been building his support. Whereas the down ticket races are going to take a serious hit from this because they're in the position of, what do I say to what he just said? I have endorsed him, and now do I say he's wrong?
Well, Senator Kirk pulled back, in Illinois, and said, "You know what? I can't deal with this guy anymore." Ryan admitted that the commentary was racist in nature. McConnell's asking him to get back on message. Lindsey Graham, more or less called him a half a kook again. At what point do they put the hammer down and just say, listen, dude, you better apologize for what you've said, or we're going to withdraw our endorsements and let the you-know-what fly, and maybe it's Hillary for 4 years, because we are not going to tie our long-term political identity to you. Do you think that could happen?
I just don't know how heavy a hammer it is they have against him. I mean, they didn't support him to start with. They reluctantly went along. Paul Ryan got apparently nothing in return for
But
his
they've gone through the motions of support here, and they look weak, and they look
But their hands
tepid.
are tied. What can they say? We're not going to support you, and therefore we are supporting Hillary Clinton, right? To their base, not supporting Trump means saying we want Hillary Clinton as president. And that, I mean, to the small base, but to their base that comes out in those primaries in droves. And so their hands are tied, and they're in a bad position. I think, none of them want this to be the future of the Republican Party. But what do? Say
Well,
we'd
is
rather have
there
Hillary
a
Clinton?
future for the Republican Party? Because right now it's harder to find. It's been decimated. He's more or less taken it hostage. He's hardly a conservative when you really measure up his stuff. He seems like a chameleon more than a measurable ideologue of any kind, right?
Well, it's going to be determined by what happens to him. If he wins, the Republican Party is going to be transformed in some direction, because it's not going to be like it was.
Into what? The thought of the day populist movement?
the Trump
No, really.
It's almost
into
like
what?
it's almost like he's running on an independent line that's sponsored by the Republican Party.
Right.
He's rented the line.
But does he rebrand it? I mean, that's the question, right? So I think, the best scenario for the Republicans right now is the phoenix rising from the fire, right? That Trump burns out and they're able to come in the next election with a really strong candidate that they can really coalesce behind and control and run a solid race, right? But in this election cycle, if he rebrands the Republican Party and really attaches the entirety of the Republican Party to his brand, that, I think, calls into question the future of the Republican Party, because they are not going to be able to recruit Latinos, which in this election may not be the make or break. I mean, there was a news report out today about the whiteness of the electorate, and it's a much more white electorate than has been given credit for the last few cycles. But moving forward, you're going to have to be able to recruit Latinos into the electorate to win. And if he rebrands the Republican Party as so anti-Latino, there's no way that the Republicans can continue to compete nationally. Now, can they compete for those extremely gerrymandered House districts? Yes, just like, really left-wing Democrats.
The Republican Party
can
had a
compete
guy
for
named
theirs.
Cruz and a guy named Rubio that were actually in this hunt. This so anti-Latino party had a couple of them. So you say the party's so anti-Latino?
No, I'm not saying the party is. I'm saying Trump is. And so if Trump rebrands the party, if the Republican Party becomes the Trump Party, then that ruins the attempts they have made to attempt to reach out to Latinos
He
over
would
the last
suggest
8
you're all
years.
West. Trump would. Yeah, what do you mean anti-Latino? I hire a bunch of them.
But Trump really just wants to win. I mean, people talk about how great chess players think a dozen or more moves ahead. I don't think Trump is thinking about all this. I don't think he's thinking about rebranding the Republican Party. I think he's thinking about how is he going to beat Hillary Clinton. I just think it's a much more spontaneous, kind of opportunistic. So I think in that sense, we're going to know at the end of the cycle what happens. I don't think we can project now what Trump is trying to do.
But I'm not saying he's trying to rebrand it, but that's the president is always the branding of the party, right? The presidential nominee is always the branding of the party. When Mondale ran, he rebranded the Democratic Party, whether or not the Democratic Party wanted it or not, right? And that's the danger for Republicans here, is that Trump rebrands them and they don't
But
want
I think you only really rebrand it if you win. I think if you lose, you were
yeah.
a candidate who failed, and people go back to what they were doing before.
The truth is, and I've examined this and kind of focused on it with every losing candidate for the presidency. The day after the loss, you're done.
Yep.
You're persona non grata. Whatever you were bringing is gone. So he could be a flash in the pan, or he could be whatever you want to call it.
Well, and that's right. If he loses, the Republican Party, has the ability to then coalesce around a quality candidate.
And I think
4
they
years
breathe
later.
easy. I think they breathe
Yeah.
easy. I think they say, we can go 4 years with Hillary,
But it's a
and we
pretty-
can get
Hey,
her.
they still, and assuming they still control Congress, they certainly can.
It's a pretty uncomfortable strategy, though, to win by losing. I mean, they've got a lot of months now to be out there.
Well,
you
win
know.
by losing is a consolation prize at best.
Right.
I mean, they've been flat-footed in this situation for a long time. We come back. How did Trump and Hillary interact? Because this is going to be a doozy. Stay with us.
The Clintons have turned the politics of personal enrichment into an art form for themselves. They've made hundreds of millions of dollars selling access, selling favors, selling government contracts, and I mean hundreds of millions of dollars. Secretary Clinton even did all of the work on a totally illegal private server.
Right? So he's laying his case out. She's laying his case out. Yet we won't. You'll be able to sell tickets to the first debate, no doubt about it. I mean, the one thing about them is I don't think they're holding anything back now. Right. I mean, where are they going to come up with something new? It'll be a reaction to whatever the events of the day are and whatever's been said.
I mean,
but
at least in recent cycles, the debates haven't made ultimately that big a difference because people's minds are set in the months before that. So it'll be interesting to see whether that changes. I mean, I think there's a lot of time between now and October, and a lot of minds, a lot of ideas are going to form up by then. So
Yes,
I wouldn't buy my
but,
ticket to the
right, we're
debate.
talking about a very small portion of the electorate that's still up for grabs. And so convincing anyone, they don't tend to watch the debates, that small portion of the electorate that's still up for grabs, because they're, you know what, people are supporting Trump today are not going to Hillary, and people are supporting Hillary today are not going to Trump. So you've got about 7%, I think, of the electorate that you have to work with, and they're not going to watch the debates. They're going to make their decision a couple weeks before the November election, and they tend to split evenly. And so what this is really a fight over is turnout.
I think your analysis is actually historically absolutely correct. My guess is that a good portion of that 7% will. I think this thing has become so Hollywood in nature that there'll be, you know, if there's some statistical data that tell us about trends and cycles and traditional, how much of that 7% actually does pay attention or watch the debates, there'll be a prorated higher number.
Sure, but even still, what this election is really about is turnout, right? Can Hillary Clinton get Bernie Sanders voters and all of that 42% plus at least half of that 7% to actually come to the polls on election day? And can Trump do the same? That's where this election will be decided.
With unfavorable ratings, their biggest numbers respectively, are they motivators for turnout?
Well, so that's what, you know, Hillary Clinton is banking on Donald Trump's unfavorables motivating people to turn out for her, even if they don't like her that much.
Yeah, but she's no prize for a lot of
Nope.
people either.
Nope.
So
And
I
but
wonder
that's
if we're
the
going to see a
danger
lot of
here,
people
right?
just stay home and go like this. I don't even want to know.
Well, that's
Just
what
tell
we're
me
hearing.
who won and we'll deal with it later.
Well, that's what we're hearing a lot of people say, right, is I'm just not going to vote. But the thing is, then you have to take responsibility for whoever wins, right? If you don't participate, then you can't say, well, I didn't vote for
Well,
the
That's
person,
why coming
right?
back to, coming
Only
back to
the professor of
Republican
political
leaders,
science talking to her students would say something
But
like
I
that at the
still
end.
find
You're
it
right.
strange that you have Republican leaders who are going to say they're not going to vote for a president. Like, I can't believe that's going to hold up. They're going to have to. I mean, one of the Trump's is going to have to decide is what is he going to do to get the Paul Ryans and the Lindsey Grahams of the world behind him to
right.
turn out their voters for
And
him.
it's only June. Thank you for coming. Come
Thank
back.
you for having me.
Nice to see you again. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. You should have seen the time during the break and the conversation there about the 7% making the decisions on this election. I know this. If you watch this show, you're not part of the 7% because you care about the country. We'll talk to you on the radio 3 o'clock on Monday on WPRO. We'll talk about the charter school funding debacle coming up on the Monday program here. Have a great weekend. Good night.